everybody's prepared. All right, that sounds like that's a good idea. Okay, I call the meeting to order of the North Syracuse Board of Education, and please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. I'm going to begin with a moment of silence for the following. Aaron C. McDonald, a graduate of the district and member of the Board of Education. John F. Fogarty, a retired employee for the North Syracuse Central School District. Leslie Ottoman Timpano Moore, a graduate of the North Syracuse Central School District. Gregory L. Mathurin, a graduate of the North Syracuse Central School District. Cheryl Kelly Force, a graduate of the North Syracuse Central School District. Thomas J. Fitzmaurice attended schools in the North Syracuse Central School District. Virginia Weston, a former employee of the North Syracuse Central School District. Maureen Hewitt, a graduate of the North Syracuse Central School District. Teresa Riker, a graduate of the North Syracuse Central School District. Rosemary Loftus Mastrolio, a retired employee of the North Syracuse Central School District. Karen Seymour, a graduate and retired employee of the North Syracuse Central School District. And Betsy Bernice Benson Savage, a retired employee of the North Syracuse Central School District. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we have an initial budget draft presentation today. That's our only presentation. So I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Keegan, who's going to share his screen with us. And when you're ready, sir.
Well, good evening. I'm going to take you through the initial budget. As everybody knows, I want to manage people's expectation. This is our first pass. A lot of information to pull together, and so this is a work in process. I appreciate your indulging us as we share with you where we are today. Our agenda is somewhat consistent with what it's been in the past. We're going to talk about some things that are impacting the budget. Dan's going to lead us off with that. And then we'll go into talking about our estimated revenues, and we'll overview the governor's state aid proposal again, and look at foundation aid, and talk about our preliminary tax cap. This will be the tax cap that's actually going to be filed with the comptroller's office on March 1st. But subject to change, and I'll explain that when we get to it. We'll go through our initial expenses, talk about the vote and election information, the vehicle proposition, touch on fund balance and reserves one more time, and then review the timeline. Again, this is our initial budget. It's a work in process, and I'll turn it over to Dan now to walk us through some of the considerations.
Thank you, Don. We want to move to the next slide there. So some of the things that we are considering will be impacting the budget. We do know that due to COVID-19, there have been some student learning deficits that we've noticed and that we've seen, and parents have let us know that their children are struggling. So what are we going to be doing as a district to address those needs? And we're looking at putting things into the budget to look at those deficits. We also know that clearly there are social and emotional needs of our students, staff, and families due to the pandemic and the trauma and the lack of socialization. We have been making sure that we're doing some things now to address that, but also what are we looking to do when we come on the other side, because I don't want people to feel that we're going to be done once people have been vaccinated and we get students back into school at some point, there's still going to be more that we're going to need to address with students and families. The ongoing management of COVID-19. There's still going to probably be some protocols that we'll still have to maintain, whether that be continue with masks and certain cleanings and things regarding social distancing. So we want to make sure we factor those into the budget as well. And will there be some changes in instructional practices? That's something that we have to have a dialogue with some of the union leaders. These are all just concepts that are happening now, but again, a lot of dialogue would have to happen if those changes were to continue. So we talked about student learning deficits, just identifying those students that are impacted. Again, some students are coming in 5 days a week, but some of our students that do have IEPs or 504 plans, or even our English language learners, what deficits might they have? Develop strategies for closing the learning gaps. So do we hire more AIS teachers to really work in pushing into the classrooms and working with those students? Do we need more coaches that are teacher coaches? How do we go about grouping students as we're looking at those deficits? Applying our interventions and also then measuring the progress that we're making with students. Now, the social emotional needs, what type of professional development do we provide for our teachers and our support staff? Because there are many households, many things that are happening with our students that we want to help our staff just be prepared for as we try to recover and come out of COVID-19 in some sense. What about screening our students to better understand their social emotional needs? What's going on with them? Last year, we hired more counselors and social workers. We may be in that ballpark again this year to do the same based on the needs. And continue to work with Onondaga County Department of Social Services and just partnering with programs to support students and their families. Now, this is a clip, Mrs. Goldberg, during our Parent Advisory Committee this past Wednesday. This is a snapshot. We have two of these from some of the things that she presented while we were with the PAC committee. And some of the social emotional things that are in place and some of the things that are embedded right now, some of the things that we have, responsive classroom, positive behavior intervention supports, second step, outreach, family visits, access, and family wellness page, and Wellness Wednesdays. Some of the things that we've talked about and looking forward that may be things that we need to do. We have a well-renowned person coming in on March 17th to talk to the district, and that is Mark Brackett. We've also working on a parent helpline at Rocks Middle for parents that are needing some support with either homework for their students or certain things, and we're looking at setting something like that up. We're currently working with teachers and through an AFT workshop, American Federation of Teachers, about restorative practices and looking at culturally responsive education. All this is part of kind of a recovery plan and working with the district to just recover what students have lost at this time. But this slide shows more of a mental health and what's in place. We've increased the amount of clinicians in several of our buildings. We do have school-based mental health clinics in 5 of our buildings. So all of our secondary, including Roxelle. The BIMAS, and I'm going to have Mrs. Goldberg come and talk to the board about that BIMAS universal screener. I think you saw it in a BPT presentation, at least it was mentioned. Talk about mental health literacy in phys ed classes. We've been working on several things with suicide safety education, family forums, mindful moments, and suicide safety protocols that are being done throughout the district. What are some things that are ahead? May is a mental health month, district-wide crisis team training, mental health policy, recovery plan, and working with community partners on county mental health steering, contact community services, and a homeschool connection around social emotional learning. Some of the things we put in with the board's help and support last year, there was a dean that was put at CNS to meet the increased needs of the building. Social worker and counselor support at Cicero L and Allen Road to make that position whole, those positions whole. Expanded partnerships with Liberty Resources and Contact, and increase in counselor staffing will allow ADAPEP to function with greater focus. And again, ongoing management of COVID-19, personal protective equipment, PPEs, as we've all known, these are things that we're going to have to continue to look at and invest in. Employee and student screening. What are we doing with those health and safety issues? Continuation of some expanded cleaning procedures. Continuing with working with the county when we have to do contact tracing. And there may be some things around vaccine tracking. Again, once we have students eligible, and just like our nurses are doing things now with certain tracking of measles, mumps, rubella, will we be asked to do that at the school level? Okay, and will there be changes in instructional practices and tools? Again, we want to provide as much professional development for staff as far as instructional technology is needed. Exploring new progress monitoring tools. Spring and summer review of our hybrid and remote learning models, and integration of into math into the 8th grade to ensure consistent approach K-8. I think the last slide that I'll be talking to you about is career and technical education. Additional courses that offerings at CNS, the junior high, Rocks Middle, and Gillette. We do live event production. I know Mr. Nadler does a great job there. Courses under development for new technologies such as drone and robotics. CNS Career Center continues to provide opportunities for students to explore new career options and to continue to foster opportunities for students through BOCES program, CTE endorsement on high school diplomas. So these are some of the things that BOCES and CTE and New Visions have to offer. We continue to look at those, and as they expand, one of the things, Mr. Crabtree, there is a new basically trucking maintenance that has been created through the help of a company down in the Cortland area. And again, it can be a new career for students trying to be the repairman for all these large equipment vehicles, and they are in short supply of these careers. So continue to work on developing those for students. So that's some of the things that initially we're looking to provide. Again, any new things where it can offer career options for students, new things with technology, not doing the same old things that were done in the past, but as we're expanding things, when you're looking at drone technology, robotics, coding, those are the things that we want to continue to provide new experiences for our students as we look towards the future. So with that being said, I'm going to turn over some of the financial back to Don.
Thanks, Dan. So let me talk to you a little bit about our revenues. As you can see from this slide, most of our revenues, the blue section and the green section, come from the tax levy and state aid respectively. We right now have kind of our arms around about $175.2 million of revenue. Unfortunately, you'll see that subheader there where we have about a $4.4 million deficit versus the expenditures, which I'm going to show you later on in the presentation. Looking at the kind of an overview of our revenues here. I'm going to talk more about the state aid, but these are the state aid numbers I showed you recently, and I think it's important to remember that our state aid is dependent on about $7.8 million of federal stimulus money that has yet to be concluded on by the federal government. So we remain hopeful that comes through, and even if that does come through, we'd like to see the governor and the legislature provide us with more aid than what's contemplated here. A couple of items, so that covers general state aid. Pilots, we have payment in lieu of tax agreements. We're planning those flat right now as we wait for more information on the status of pilot agreements. Sales tax collection, that's a good estimate of what our revenues are. Interest with interest rates, they're still historically low, but we've been very effective in squeezing every bit of interest we can out of our investments. Our fund balance, you'll notice, we appropriated last year $4 million. That was an increase for us, and we're contemplating appropriating another $4 million into the 21-22 budget. Rent, most of that is for BOCES programs that are run in our buildings, and we're able to charge rent for those. Last year, you'll remember, we used $1 million of our general reserve. That reserve is substantially completed, so we won't have that this year to use. We continue to do well with our Medicaid billing, thanks to our special ed folks who do a great job with that. Working with our BOCES team that does our Medicaid billing, we're projecting an increase in that for next year. And then other revenue is a whole bunch of things. One of the things that's in there is our BOCES refund. And I'm going to talk about our BOCES budget, but one of the things that happens at the end of every year is that BOCES spends maybe less money than they planned on, and BOCES is not allowed to have a fund balance. So when they have efficiencies in their organization, or maybe we thought we needed something that we subscribed to, and we might have even paid for, but BOCES, we didn't end up taking advantage of that, they give us a refund. And that's one of the things that comes through in the refunds, along with a whole bunch of different things. As we get closer to the final budget, I'll be able to provide more detail on that. And then our building aid number that we've talked about. Not much to talk about in terms of the assumptions. We're still on pins and needles about our state aid. I'm going to take you through the detailed property tax calculation. I already mentioned we're going to appropriate another $4 million, or we're planning on that, again, subject to the board's approval for next year. State aid, the number that was included in the previous table was this number, 68.3 million. And then our building aid of 2.8 million. And then this is the $7.8 million I was referring to that we're dependent on for stimulus money. And so let me explain that. What the governor's saying is, in order to give us what he's proposing, he needs another $7.8 million from the federal government. So he has this thing called the pandemic adjustment. So what that basically means is, this is what I'd like to give you. I can't afford to give you that by about $7.8 million. So that's the negative number, the amount that the state can't afford to pay us. But if we get $7.8 million from the federal government, that'll offset our shortfall and allow North Syracuse to get the money that we expected. And then obviously we include on this slide as well our UPK grant, that's $606,120 that we've been working with, that same amount for years. That hasn't gone up in quite some time. But that's our overview of state aid. We've all heard me harp about foundation aid, but it's still a big issue. We have just not been successful in getting New York State to budge on this and to share more aid, more foundation aid for those districts that are underfunded, and we are one of those districts. We're projecting next year that our deficit in foundation aid will be about $13 million. I just can't even imagine what our district would look like if we had another $13.1 million to spend on student programs, and God knows we could use the funds. The governor's budget proposal, there are a couple little things that we were stressed out about. I've mentioned these to you before. One of them was, last year we did so much community outreach with our drivers, giving out meals at feeding sites and delivering instructional materials and meals. And we got nervous that we weren't going to get paid aid on those. And the governor came back and said he was going to pay us aid for those meals that were delivered, which was great. The other thing we're a little bit stressed out about, and we've talked to our legislators about, is the governor's consolidation of several aids. And we'll be watching that closely. And what that basically means is we have certain aids that are expense driven. The state has said to us, we know that you need to procure certain services and spend certain amount of money directly proportional to the needs of your students. And so go ahead and spend that money, and we have an aid ratio that we're going to give you aid based on what you spend. Those are expense-driven aids. The government would like to lock those down so that they're not reimbursed to districts based on how much we spend. And we're very much opposed to that because so much of what we spend is really driven by law, you know, what we're required to provide for students and whatnot, and whether it be transportation or specific services. And so we like the mode that says we can at least count on a reimbursement based on an aid ratio. And so we'll watch that closely and report back to the board as we hear more. That's pretty much state aid. Talking about our tax cap now. Again, these are the numbers that'll be filed by March 1st with the Comptroller's office, but I want to let you know that a few of these numbers are subject to change, and we can in fact refile with the Comptroller's office if they do change. But I'm going to walk you through the calculation here quickly. The levy for the 2021 school year, the year we're in right now, was $92.5 million. That's that first number in the top of the column here. The tax base growth factor looks at has your tax base grown in your community? Is there a need for you to provide greater services? And they allow us to increase our levy by that tax base growth factor that's published by the Comptroller's office. That's a published rate. We don't get to control that, and we've done that. We separate this whole notion of pilots. Pilot are payment in lieu of tax agreements. So if a new business moves into town, they agree to make a certain payment. It's not their full taxes. They're going to pay a payment amount, and they get an incentive to do that. And what the tax cap does, the tax cap says, hey, if you're going to get pilot revenue, we need to separate that out from your tax levy. And so that's what this line is here. It's basically isolating the pilot revenue because the taxpayers don't have to pay for that. So they're saying don't charge the taxpayers for that. You'll get that from the taxpayers via the municipality. And then we have our tax levy for capital, and that's really the local share of all the capital projects that taxpayers have voted on over the years. And then the number right in the middle, the allowable tax levy growth factor, is basically inflation. And what we know is that the CPI, the Consumer Price Index for Northeast cities, designated that our CPI was going to be, that our inflation factor was going to be 1.23%. So this increases our tax levy by that 1.23%. And then we adjust out the pilots and the tax levy for capital so that only the increase gets applied to the levy. And so you might say, well, what's the increase in that tax levy for capital? Well, for example, our taxpayers approved the construction of the fuel island and a recent roof project and the Bear Road capital project. So when they approve those things, that means we have greater local share, and we add those things to the tax levy for capital. Now, if one of our projects is fully paid for, those drop off. So the taxpayers are only paying for the projects where there's current debt associated with those, and they're only paying the local share of those projects. And so our estimated levy for the 21-22 school year is $95.4 million. And that's about a 3.16% increase. And again, that's subject to change based on our final pilot numbers that'll be coming through in the next month and our final tax levy for capital. And we're working with fiscal advisors. They're the group that helps us make decisions about when we should issue bonds. And what they help us marry up the state aid with the debt service so that we get the best possible deal for the taxpayers. And so when those numbers are finalized, we'll update those. But right now it looks like with this levy that a $100,000 home before STAR would have an increase of about $74.
Hey, Don, can I ask you a question on this page
Sure.
since we're here?
Sure.
because I think it's important to understand, as long as I understand it correctly. Pilot agreements, I mean, we don't get to weigh in on those. That's with the Industrial Development Agency of the county.
That's
Uh,
right. I mean, we do have our attorneys help us kind of keep an eye on those and make sure if there's something objectionable that we can protect our taxpayers' interests. Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off.
no, that's fine, but I do understand, you know, there's obviously an economic growth piece in there, and they guarantee jobs. And some of these businesses won't come in without a pilot agreement, but
Right.
is it fair to say pilots are, I don't know what word I want to use, are suppressing our tax cap
Sure,
essentially, correct?
because yeah, sure. Think about it this way: if a business comes in and that assessed value of that property is $100,000, and in order to incent that business, they say, "Hey, we're only going to charge you guys if you're as if your property was only worth $50,000. We get less taxes," and so that negatively impacts the tax revenues that the district gets because we'd otherwise get it based on the full assessed value. Um, and only when that property leaves the pilot world and enters the tax rolls do we benefit fully from that property.
Yeah, because I am aware that NISBA does have legislation to try and change the way pilots are not recognized here, but that's not moved anywhere in the past, and I don't know if it will.
The governor has been very resistant to any changes to the tax cap calculation. And frankly, we've been very lucky. I say this often. We've been very lucky that our inflation's been low because remember the tax cap says 2% or inflation, whichever is less. So if we get into a hyperinflationary period where you've got a 4% inflation, that's going to really squeeze schools, and this
Mhm.
tax cap formula is just going to be a real challenge. The other one we've been very lucky, I think in my 9 years with the district, and I might be wrong about this, but I think I'm pretty accurate. We've not had an ERS or TRS adjustment where it's gone up more than 2 percentage points in rate. Because if it does that, we can't pass that on to the taxpayers. But so due to the good management of our ERS and our TRS, our employees' retirement fund and our teachers' retirement fund, we haven't had to experience increases that we haven't been able to include in the cap, and that's been very advantageous to us.
Thank you.
So let's move on. Those are the two big pieces of revenue: our New York State aid, our school aid, and our tax levy. And now let's take a look at our expenditures. So our expenditures right now, again, preliminarily, are coming in at 179.6 million. And I'm going to explain to you where those increases are, but I want to just emphasize we're a people-based business. I say this every year. The most important thing we do is put adults in front of children, and there's been a real concerted effort to make sure that that's where we spend our money, is making sure that we've got the supports in place for our children. That's the blue piece, and the green piece of the pie are the people. I've talked about our debt service. We have debt service. We have a mortgage just like everybody else, and we're paying down our mortgage. But that's our monthly mortgage. That's our annual mortgage payment there. We spent a lot of money on supplies, and maybe a little more this year because of COVID. We spent a lot of money with BOCES. That's the $18 million that we have there to purchase services. Two big groups. We spent a lot of money to support our special ed population. We spent a lot of money to support our core systems, our student management system, our financial systems, our technology. BOCES provides a lot of services that we can buy cheaper by buying through BOCES because we can collaborate with the other districts in our area, those other 22 districts. And we'll buy equipment. We're trying to be good stewards of the community's money and replace equipment before it costs too much to maintain. And we're going to do a special project. We're real excited about the project that's being done at Allen Road this year to improve their entryway and their security. And that's where we spent our money historically, is on things like that. And another legislative initiative is to try to see if we can get that special project increased to $250,000. We'd really benefit from that because I hate to say this, but when you're doing construction work on a building, there's not a lot you can do for $100,000. But we're going to keep that in the budget for next year, and we hope to come up with a project that'll meet the board's approval. So, increases here, looking at, we settled all of our contracts. So, our salaries are just based on contractual increases. We've done a good job. I know no one likes to see a 5% increase in benefits, but when you think about what's gone on in terms of healthcare costs and whatnot, that's our biggest number in there is our healthcare. It's an increase that really is the result of a lot of cost containment and control while maintaining benefits. Our debt service, the big increase there obviously is the projects I referenced earlier, though that debt coming online for Bear Road, for roof projects, for the fuel island and whatnot. A little bit of an increase there in BOCES. We're still sorting out, working with our team to evaluate all the different BOCES services and make sure we've got a good budget for that. And that's our initial estimate. Slight increase in equipment and supplies and other costs. Again, as Dan mentioned, there are going to be some ongoing costs of COVID, and we want to make sure we build all that PPE in and whatnot in the budget, and that's in there. So that's the expenditure increases. This slide is redundant of a slide I showed the board before, but it kind of just explains some of those increases in health benefits and retirement costs and salaries and wages and fuel and energy costs. Our energy costs is another big factor for us, and we're in the process of working with our consortium called NISMIC, the New York State Municipal Energy Consortium, and we're outbidding our gas and electric, and when we have that information, we'll incorporate that into the budget as well. We have estimates in there for now. I show this slide every year. This is our expenditures per pupil. And so this looks at the 23 component school districts here in central New York, in the Onondaga, Cortland, Madison, BOCES, and shows where we rank within the BOCES. We're ranked 19th out of 23, and where we rank within the state. And so I'll just point out that operating a school is a big expense. It's an expensive operation, but we spend far less per student than many districts within our BOCES. And when you think about the number of districts in New York State, I think it's 677 that were included in this reporting. We're at 645. So this certainly gives a sense of where we rank. And some of our spending per pupil is lower because we can achieve economies of scale as a large district. But I would like to argue that we're fiscally responsible with the taxpayers' money, and we're also trying to live within the constraints that have been forced upon us due to the lack of foundation aid. But that's our spending per pupil. So kind of summarizing some of the things we've talked about so far. Estimated tax levy increase of 3.16%. This is at the tax cap, so it'll require one more yes vote than no vote, a simple majority. Unfortunately, our current state aid is not sufficient to balance the budget, and we have a deficit of about $4.4 million. I recap here our increases in revenue and expenses, and I just want to emphasize that fourth bullet point, which Dan spent some time taking us through at the beginning. I mean, a lot of what you're going to see in terms of programmatic changes and cost shifts here are going to be focused on fostering the district's recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. And as I mentioned earlier, this is a work in process. Our team, we got a lot of people working on the budget, and they're still working away, and we'll look forward to sharing updates with you at future meetings. In terms of the vote and election, the usual format about our polling places, we're optimistic that we'll be able to have an in-person vote this year. I guess that's yet to be determined. And it'll be on, if it happens as scheduled, it'll be May 18th, Tuesday, May 18th, from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. We'll once again have a library proposition. We received this letter earlier this month from the Salina Library, and they've got a very modest increase included in their budget. Vehicle bonding, a little lower than we spent last year on vehicles, and we're gonna buy 10 65 passenger gasoline engine buses and 2 special ed buses. These are a little shorter, have wheelchair positions and hydraulic lifts and air conditioning in those, and then 1 loader, bucket loader for our M&O department. An estimated cost of the 12 buses, actually 13 vehicles, is 1.6 million, almost 1.7 million dollars. And the tax impact after transportation aid, but before STAR, is about 180. I'm sorry, is $1.85 for a $100,000 home. That's the vehicles. I want to just touch quickly on our unassigned fund balance. Because this will be a year when we really want to keep our eye on fund balance and understand how we can leverage this to make sure we can do the things we need to do in the 21-22 school year. So just kind of going down, we ended the year last year with a $9.7 million fund balance, which was over the 4.4% that Albany encourages us to maintain. We think, though, once again, we're going to have favorable variances this year. We put a spending freeze in place recently. There are certain costs we're not incurring as a result of COVID. We're really trying to do a good job of shifting expenses to where they can have the greatest impact. But we think we'll have at least a $1.3 million favorable variance. We'll appropriate another $4 million, and that'll leave us with a fund balance, estimated fund balance at the end of this year of about $7.1 million. That represents about 3.96% of the initial budget, which again is the estimated expenditure budget, which is right around the 4% that Albany encourages us to maintain. I wanted to point out these reserves. 2 things to note. One is that general liability reserve. As you remember, it used to be $1,019,000. We used $1 million of it to support this year. These are our 3 relatively new reserves that we have for ERS, TRS, and employee benefit liability. And those will help us as we try to navigate through the rest of this budget season. We'll keep an eye on those and see if we can use those to offset some of our costs going into the future. And then the budget calendar. So it's hard to believe we're already at February 22nd. We've looked at the initial budget. We'll be back to the board in a couple weeks with our final tax cap, an update that I think will be much more fine-tuned based on feedback from our principals and directors and others that are participating in the process. We hope to have you approve our bus bond proposition at that time and our notice of budget hearing and election. And then it'll be April 5th before we know it when the board will be adopting the budget, and hopefully that'll be ready for the voters to consider on May 4th. We'll do our budget hearing, and then on May 18th we'll vote on it. Any questions or comments? I know there's a lot of information there, but any thoughts?
I like to ask, as you know, Don, with the legislative committee, you mentioned 2 things. The foundation aid being frozen all these years, we need to change that. The second thing is the grouping of, transportation and BOCES and other things together. But the other new thing is the STAR. Can you explain that a little bit? And that's kind of hit the news the last couple of days.
Yeah, the governor would like to shift that program. I mean, what he really wants is he wants people to pay their full taxes and not get a discount on their bill. And he's implemented that already. We see that if you've bought a home recently, you know that you're paying the full tax bill and getting a refund from New York State. The governor would like to make that business as usual for everybody. It gives him a little more control, I think, of the STAR program. And I think there's a lot of people that are nervous that whether you're receiving basic STAR, senior STAR, or the third level of STAR, which is income based. There's a lot of people that are very nervous because it creates a significant cash flow problem for homeowners if they have to lay out the entire tax bill and then wait for a refund from Albany.
Well, that affected me this year. my taxes, when I got my tax bill early September, my taxes went up $600. However, I got a check about 3 weeks later from the state government. So what the concern is, people are going to see their taxes, tax bill, they'll vote on the budget and nothing will happen. But then in September, when they get their tax bill, they're going to really, like I did, I jumped out of my chair, but I got I did very well because I got a check. And I think that's going to be a concern of people. It's going to be if the governor gets his way with this.
You know what? It's kind of funny too that, and we talk about this all the time, that the only budget you get to vote on is your school budget. And so when you're mad, you take it out on your school budget, and that's unfortunate. Any other questions or comments? All right. Well, thank you for being very patient and listening to all that, and we'll look forward to updating you soon.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Keegan. Okay, we're going to move on to Board of Education committee reports, and I know we have committee meetings this week, so I'm going to go to Ms. Scanlon for her report.
Yes, our policy committee is meeting tomorrow, February 23rd at 5 p.m.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Crabtree, do you want to comment? I know you have legislation
Right.
this week.
We always follow the policy committee. They have it on Tuesday. So ours is Wednesday, 6 o'clock. And we'll be looking at some of the things that Don talked about today and hopefully the stimulus coming through.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to make any comments on the BOCES report while we're here?
Just very simply,
We received it.
if you look at the report, my concern that I brought to Mr. Cook is that they're starting to print testing. I'm very concerned about this. And it's costing North Syracuse, it's costing all the school districts money to print these tests. And so they've started printing the ELA test. So my concern is, I believe, Dan or Chris, the testing for 3rd through 8th starts in March sometime. So I'm very concerned that this hasn't been postponed yet like it was in years past, and also the regents. So I know there's a waiver to the federal government about this, but we're getting close to this grade 3 through 8 test. And I'm really concerned about that. That's my own concern. 2 other dates. I believe Dan and Don saw the administrative and program budgets for BOCES through their superintendents and business officials meeting. There will be an annual meeting, which I know Mike and Mary always go to. It will be Zoom on April 7th. You'll all be invited to see where BOCES is going in Onondaga, Cortland, Madison County. And then as Don just said, on April 19th, our board will get to vote on the administrative budget, not the program budget, but the administrative budget, and also Board of Education members. And we do have 2 that were appointed this year that'll have to run. The one from Fayetteville, Manlius and JD, and the one from Fabius Poppy, Tully and Lafayette. So just 2 dates to keep in mind. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Crabtree. Mr. Bowles, superintendent's comments.
Thank you, Mr. Farfalia. The first thing is that next Monday, our junior high and high school will be moving to 2 days a week of instruction in person. People are looking forward to that happening, but that will start on Monday, March 1st. We'll also be surveying our families this week to talk about if they are interested in having their children come to school more often. Several questions on there. Maybe are they looking for 5 days a week of in-person instruction? You're hearing a lot on the news. What's going to happen if they lower the social distancing restrictions? So we want to hear from our families. We will also be working on things to hear from our students and our staff. We had a very nice over the break parent advisory committee. Lisa Goldberg, our director of social emotional learning, did a presentation for parents just about resources and things about that they can utilize to help their children, or resources where they can get assistance for their children if they are struggling, especially during this difficult time. I think it was very well received, and Lisa did an excellent job. And you saw a few slides in our presentation of things that have been put into place. Did see there was an article about CNY Scholastic Art Awards, and there are many of our students that did win awards. And again, things are still moving forward, and we still have students that do incredible things with their educational abilities and things that they do on the side. The other thing that is going on is that I've been participating with teachers in an AFT workshops called, and we're working on restorative practices and culturally responsive practices. And several administrators and teachers and union leaders are working in conjunction to bring some of that information back to the district. So we are looking to, again, communicate with our families about more in-person learning. We want to work on some of the things that you're hearing in the news as rates are going down, not only in New York State, but also in our county, and more people are being vaccinated. I think we're starting to turn the corner with things and trying to work on getting some students some more in-person instruction to help with some of the areas, not only socially, but academically, and get back to some semblance of what we used to call normal.
Okay, great, thank you. All set?
Yes.
Okay, under Board of Education comments, and before we start, I just wanted to briefly just, once again, we had a very long list for our moment of silence today, and one of our own, Erin McDonald, was on that, and just want to say, she'll be missed, and she fully expected to be back and participating with the board in January, and didn't work out. And all of us, we all knew Erin, and she spoke her mind. I mean, her and I had our back and forth, that's for sure. But in the end, it was always all good, and her heart was in the right place. She was really committed to public education, so she will be missed. She will be missed. So Board of Ed comments, others?
I just want to say, sports is back. I've been watching some of the games on YouTube. Mike will be very surprised. Yep, I am watching YouTube, Michael. And our boys basketball team is doing fairly well. What an exciting game the other day in the afternoon. It was in the afternoon. And we played Liverpool in their very beautiful new gymnasium, and it was back and forth and back and forth. And it was a great game. We lost, but definitely the new coach should be thanked for what he's done with his team. The girls team with Jessica Cook as the leader, along with other girls, I believe are undefeated. Mr. Seiken's doing a good job. But watching CNS the other day, 2 weeks ago, when we had a home game, you have to congratulate the two young men that are announcing the game. Now, when Liverpool was on, there was no announcing. You just watched, okay? You just watched and the scorekeeper talked. But we got Giovanni and somebody else. I apologize for not knowing his name. They are phenomenal. You need to turn on and listen to them, because wow, they're great sportscaster, and it makes it really fun. And then I went to the drugstore the other day, and the young man that is a clerk is on the hockey team. What a difference in his personality. I go in there quite often, and he's been kind of down because he wasn't sure there was going to be hockey. But boy, what a change in his, I believe, mental health and how he feels because he's playing hockey. And then the last thing is, I know it's very hard for all of us with Erin. It's just really, really a surprise. And I thank you, Mr. President, for the wonderful words that you have said. But I know two people personally. It was a bad week for me last week. Matter of fact, that one day was very bad. Karen Seymour. And again, these names don't mean a lot to a lot of you, but Karen taught in our school district. I got to know her when I was a freshman teacher in 71 at the board office. Her room was 2 down from Connie's office where the special ed is. Phenomenal second grade teacher, cared about kids. She did all kinds of neat activities. And then we went through a school closing and she went to Roxborough. And I've been talking to Diane Feeney, and Diane would say she was there at 11 o'clock at night. The custodian would have to say, I got to go home. I got to close up. But she dedicated to our school district. And then the one that Connie just talked to me about was my music teacher that was on the cart at the district office. She was elderly then, and Connie said she lived to be 99, but again, when Pitcher Hill closed, she went down to Roxborough, but another great person. So it's very difficult when we know people, Paul, you know Elvis, know Aaron, but then these people, were my friends in school. So it's difficult for all of us, very difficult.
Thank you, Bob. Okay, routine action items. If I get a motion for the consideration of approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of the board on February 4th, motion from Ms. Kruger, second from Ms. Scanlon. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Minutes are carried. I'd like to combine B, C, and D. If I get a motion for those three, a motion from Mr. Harrington, second from Ms. Scanlon. They are the consideration and classification of placement of disabled students in the district and preschool and for home instruction. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Motion, please, for E, acknowledgement of business office reports for January 2021. A motion from Ms. Kruger, second from Ms. Scanlon. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, and that is carried. We have appointment of a district treasurer. A, discussion action items. I get a motion to place that before us. Motion from Ms. Kruger, second from Ms. Scanlon. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, that is carried. Motion for B, our New York State DOT Route 11 project, that land piece. Motion for B, please. Motion from Ms. Kruger, second from Ms. Scanlon. That was described, any discussion we did hear about that was in the Friday letter, and we've talked about that another time also. Seeing none, all in favor?
I need to do a roll call vote on that, Paul.
Oh, I'm sorry, I did see that and I
No,
skipped right
that's
by.
okay. That's okay.
That's
Paul
before
Farfalia.
us, go ahead.
Okay, Paul Farfalia,
Aye.
Michael Marizio,
Aye.
Robert Crabtree,
Aye.
George Harrington,
Aye.
Matthew Herman,
Aye.
Terry Kruger,
Aye.
Mary Scanlon,
Aye.
and Mark Thorne.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, if I get a motion, put C before us, the acknowledgement of the gift. A motion from Ms. Scanlon, second from Ms. Kruger. Oh, okay, it's before us. Any discussion? Thank you, 4D Productions. They're in there. All in favor? Opposed, and that is carried. Motion for D, surplus of non-marketable goods. Motion from Mr. Harrington, second from Ms. Kruger. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, that is carried. And we have 2 retirements to acknowledge today. We have Loriana Mokler, teaching assistant, retiring with 22 years of service. And Mary Bonacore, school bus attendant, retiring with 22 years of service. And we will be acting on those in the instruction and the support staff personnel report. Okay, and the instructional personnel report also. And to put that before us, I could use a motion for item A, instructional personnel report. Motion from Mr. Thorne, second from Ms. Kruger. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, that is carried. Need a motion to put B, the support staff personnel report before us and accept. Motion from Ms. Scanlon, second from Mr. Harrington. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, that is carried. And I'm going to make a motion, and I'll ask for a second. A motion moving to executive session for the purpose of reviewing the employment record of 5 individuals with no action to follow. If I could get a second, please. Second from Mr. Maurizio. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And a motion for adjournment, please. Motion from Mr. Thorne, second from Mr. Harrington. Discussion? None, all in favor? Opposed? We are adjourned, and I will see you all at the executive session link. Thank you very much.